Hi there. Welcome to In the Rough with Angie. I am interviewing my friend Erica today. So Erica and I met through church. And when I first met you, Erica, you were so easy to talk to. I know it's hard sometimes getting to know people, but with you, I remember we were at this group and you just came right up to Jimmy and me, my husband, and you're like, "Hi, I'm Erica." And you just started talking to us, and it just I just felt comfortable with you right away. And then as I got to know you, I learned that that's like a part of you that is a gift that you have. Like you can really talk to anybody. And I think you make friends easily. And you're a trustworthy friend and also a friend that inspires me because I think friendships are supposed to help you grow. And I think if you're getting to know someone and the friendship is like holding you back or not pushing you forward, maybe that's not the best friendship. But I feel like with you, even though we don't talk all the time, I always get motivated and inspired by you because you're a go-getter. So that is how we met. I'll start this with a silly question so that we can get to know you pretty quickly. So I think you can tell a lot about a person based off of their playlist, like what they listen to on road trips. So let's say that maybe it's like a Wednesday and you're doing your podcast and Richard has the kids and you're done at your podcast for a couple hours and he calls you and he says, "I have a surprise for you. I booked a house by the lake that we're going to stay at for a week and the kids and I are already here. It's like 2, 3 hours away. So you can just get in the car, head over. I got your favorite snacks in there." So you're in like a really great state of mind. Like you're excited, like everything's taken care of. So what are you going to put on your playlist? Like, what music are you listening to when you start that road trip?
Well, okay, Angie, first off, that's like a great visualization of something that would be amazing to happen of
No pressure, Richard.
Yeah, right. Richard, when you hear this, no pressure, but that sounds awesome. Okay, so when you first started asking the question, like what would be on the playlist, I was like thinking, okay, womp womp, boring, but I'd have like a list of podcasts that I'd listen to.
That's good.
So I wouldn't have
Yeah.
music, but I'll answer your music question because you're right. It does tell a lot about a person. So I would either have country music or I would blast the Wicked soundtrack, the original or the new movie. And I would
Okay.
imagine myself being Elphaba on stage and just belting my voice out for the world to hear, even though I do not have the Elphaba voice at all. So that's what I would have. Or maybe I do a little throwback to NSYNC or Whitney
Yeah.
Houston, maybe a little Michael Jackson.
See, yeah, and that's what I was thinking. The song that you could scream at the top of your lungs that you're the only one there, you're happy, you're having a good day, and the future's bright, and you could just scream the song out.
You know the song I Want to Dance with Somebody? Is that Whitney
Oh,
Houston?
yeah, I think it
Or I don't
is.
know if anyone knows for sure, but that's like the karaoke go-to song that if I karaokeed often, that's what I would choose.
Yeah, that's a good one.
But Angie, I also want to say too, thank you for your sweet words that you said at the beginning, because when you and I met, I also felt the exact like draw towards you when we met in first conversations and then just through our, little play dates that we would have with our kiddos, and like you go deep and you also encouraged me. And so I just wanted to tell you that too, that I appreciate you so much.
Well, thank you. Well, jumping right in, you have a podcast as well. You started way before me. Do you remember when was it that you did your first episode?
It was November 2022. Thank you to you, Angie.
Oh, thank you. Well, you already have it in you, and I was amazed too, like how quickly you grew. I was thinking, okay, maybe she'll do a couple podcasts and get into it, but it was like one after the other. And then all of a sudden, you're at like 80 episodes. And I was just amazed, like, wow, she actually took it and went with it. Because some people will start something and like just halfway do it, but you really put your heart into it and went for it. So that encourages me to keep going too, because I can be lazy sometimes, but no, I need to keep going.
Well, it helped, like, honestly, I mean, you were the reason why I have the podcast, because we were talking about other things in life and you're like, "Have you ever thought about having a podcast?" And I was like, "No, Angie, what would I even do it about? My brother has one, he's funny." And you're like, "Clean beauty, you're into that?" And I was
Yeah.
like, "That would be so boring." And then every time I would see you for like the next few months, you just kept asking me about it. And so like I put it on top of the little shelf, and then my other idea that I had, which is what the podcast is about. And then one day it just like clicked. And I mean, it's really thanks to you. It's been cool because like I've had so many people that I've interviewed as well, where God has used a friend or a person in their life to like see something in them that they may not necessarily see. And that propels them to whatever next step that is, whether it's big or small. But it's like they see something in a friend of theirs, they speak that into them, and then boom, it goes to, wherever it needs to go. So that was you to me.
Well, thank you. I actually started mine, same kind of situation. A friend just randomly texted me about a book I had been writing like 15 years ago that I stopped writing. And I just was thinking I don't want anything to do with that. I tried that route, it didn't work out. But then I thought of like you and your podcast, and I was thinking, you know what? What if I just am honest about where I'm at in life? Like I haven't like overcome to this great extent that I should be speaking to the world about anything, but I can be honest about where I'm at and have a podcast about overcoming. And so it's interesting. Like sometimes it just takes somebody else to see something for you to decide to go for it. So what is your podcast about?
Well, the podcast is called the More Than Your Age podcast, and it is an interview based podcast like yours, where I interview women who chase after goals or dreams, regardless of their age or life circumstance. I have found that once we become adults, and really probably past 21 or maybe to 25, I feel like with women, it's always looking negatively towards getting older or what you don't have. And it's like, oh my gosh, when you're 25, oh, I'm a quarter life. And you're like, now looking back, you're like, little 25-year-old me. That's so funny. Or, turning 30 or 40. And there's just always this negative. I mean, I feel like always when I'm around women my age, that's like what we're talking about is I'm getting so old. And it's just this negativity towards aging and your age and what you can do. And so people will use that to avoid chasing after the things that they want. And so I just kind of was tired of it and was like, you know what? I want to interview. When the idea for the podcast came to be, I was like, I want to interview women and talk to women who don't live by those limitations, or maybe they have in the past, but they've similar, where they've overcome that negative mindset and they push forward and they chase after the things that they want, or they encountered a really hard life situation and they use that to push them forward, whether that's like start a career or, a new business or a hobby or whatever it may be, but just that they have a positive outlook. And so it's called More Than Your Age, or the More Than Your Age podcast, because we are more than that silly little number that we worry about.
I know. And I think about that. I think about your refrain where you say, you are more than your age. And I have to think about it a lot because you're right. I mean, when I turned 30, I was kind of depressed about it until I turned 30. And then I realized, okay, I still have some things in life to do. And then 40 was the same, but 40, I think, was more of like a vanity for me, that I'm going to start declining and wrinkling and all that stuff. But now I'm working through it. So what are some examples of some women that you've interviewed? Some, I guess, just a couple inspiring stories that women have overcome the age factor and went for their dream.
Yeah. So I interviewed this woman. Her interview came out last week, so it's kind of a little fresh on my mind, but hers was really cool because she was a theater teacher. She studied performing arts, or there's the difference she was talking about. She lives in the UK, so that's also fun to get to meet people from all over the world.
Yeah.
And so she taught drama for so long, and like just thought that she was going to retire doing that. And then she just had a rough situation with work, like a bullying situation, to where she resigned and thought, you know what, maybe I'm going to pursue acting full time. And I think she was 54 when she left the job full time. And so now she's pursuing acting as a full time career, which she never really thought that that's what she wanted to do. But then it was this whole new dream realization that she's going to do that. I have a woman I'm going to interview coming up, and she became a model, which is kind of funny, at like 50, 51, 52 as well. And then I had another woman who had a lot of hard things that happened, but to cope with with just the difficulty, she started running. So she now, I forget her age too. She's like 64, 66, but she ran her 46th ultra marathon. So you have a marathon that is 26 miles, but the ultras are, I think, 100 or over 100 miles.
Oh my
And
gosh.
42 or 40, I can't remember the number either. But I'm like, oh my goodness. So by her next birthday, which was just a little bit ago, she ran those many, ultra marathons. So that was really cool. There was a woman who became a pilot at the age of 39. She was a flight attendant before. And so she did that. And then my last episode that I'm going to have for, I guess you could say, the season before I take a break for the summer is a woman who, anyway, I can't show too much with it, but she had 15, a convicted felon for over 15 counts, convicted felon. And then what happened after all of that, it was just crazy.
Wow.
So if your listeners want to hop and listen to that one, it'll be episode 100. But that one, it was just, I read her book and I was just in awe of everything so much that I'm going to interview her a second time because I'm like, there's so much more to your life and whatnot. So it's been so cool because I'm so inspired by these women where I think the thing for me, I struggled with, so I was a teacher, then I worked in HR and I wanted to climb the HR ladder. And then I think I just kind of had a little bit of a glass ceiling where I was, even though I loved the place I was at. And then I kind of debated whether I should leave and stay home with my kids. And my husband was like, if this is what you want to do, we will figure it out to make it work. It's not one of those like, we're so rich and everything to be able to do it. But it's like, no, we're going to figure out a way to make it work. And so I went back and forth because I would hear negative comments like you don't use your brain when you stay home or you're going to be so far removed. And I started to believe a lot of those. And so I finally was like, or I was worried too, like when I get back into the workforce, I'm going to be so far behind. What's going to happen? And so I was struggling with those thoughts, those negative thoughts. Then I ultimately decided that I didn't want to miss out on these years and we were going to figure it out and make it work. But after interviewing all these women, part of me, I was like, I feel like this has kind of been a therapy for me. I'm just like, I'm going to be fine. God's got this under control. And even if we go through a really hard season and a struggle, something will happen. We'll figure it out. And no matter what, God is not done with us until we're ultimately in heaven with him.
Yeah.
For those of us who follow him. And so
I
think just hearing all those stories, I'm like, I get pumped and motivated and it just really has helped me.
I love that. Yeah. I was at the thrift store the other day and they had on worship music and none of the worship songs were really making me feel good or uplifted. I don't know why I felt like annoyed in a way. And I was like, God, why do I feel annoyed right now? Like I'm not trying to be that way. But then they had come back on to the radio and they had said, hey, God has your tomorrow already figured out. And that for some reason, that's what I needed to hear. And that changed my whole perspective for the rest of the time I was at the thrift store. But it's like, I do worry a lot how things are going to happen. But if I just trust that he already has tomorrow, then I don't. And it sounds cliche, but it's true. Then I can just rest in my life right now, knowing that he's got it. He's got me. So it's good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So would you say your faith is the most important thing to you in life?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It absolutely is.
Okay, so the heart of this podcast is talking about how we're not all perfected yet. We're all still working things out in life and we're still overcoming certain things, but to be encouraged that we have overcome things in the past and that can be our fuel for overcoming in the future. So today I wanted to talk about an area of your life that you've overcome and then how you overcame it. Like, was it an act of God? Was it a miracle? Was it your own self-will? Was it somebody in your life helped you? Like, what are the details of overcoming that area? Like, first, what was it? And then two, how did you overcome it?
So in when we met, I think actually it was 2022. Did I meet you before that? I can't remember.
I think we did.
Okay, we met in like 2021?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like in the fall? Okay. So in around Easter time in 2022, my husband and I, we found out we were expecting our third child and we were excited and just excited with everything as you are. And everything was looking great and perfect. And we waited until, for our first two, we waited till the delivery to find out if we were having a boy or a girl. And so we decided we wanted to do that with our third as well. And so every time we'd go to appointments, everything looks good, everything looks good, everything looks good. And so we're just like, great, everything looks great. And we, I think like around Halloween, maybe. So I was due at Christmas, and like the only thing we would say is like, oh, we don't want a Christmas baby. So, whatever we can do, we want not to have the baby on Christmas, which, now looking back, I'm like, that's so stupid. So, so around Halloween, I think I was just overexerting myself, and I just started having a lot of contractions. And so we went to the hospital just to make sure everything was okay. And they just were like, they put me on bed rest for a little bit. And then I went to my doctor for the weekend. And then I went to my doctor the following Monday, and she just said, hey, you're just working a little extra hard. So you just need to chill out. But the baby looks fine. Okay, awesome. And so, but then I would just have contractions all the time. So that was kind of it. But during this time too, my husband and I, we were studying the book of Job together, which I had never read the book of Job. Maybe I heard a sermon, but it never stuck with me. And so if people are listening and they haven't read the book of Job, it's also crazy. If you've never read the Bible, or you've only read like stuff here and there, I mean, there's a lot of crazy things that happened in the Bible. And I feel like people who don't know fully have this assumption that if it's a Bible story, it's like hunky dory and everything was great, because if you follow God, then everything was great and easy. And that is the furthest from the truth. But anyway, Job loved God so much. And at some point, I wish I had the verse out for you to share, but I think it was at the very beginning. God is having this interaction with Satan, and he basically is saying, Job loves me so much. Do what you will to him, except don't take his life. And I'm going to prove to you that he loves me. And I'm like, what? Wait a second. Yeah. You're gonna just allow like Satan to do what he will and just see how Job loves you. And so everything was stripped away from him, and his family, his friends, he lost his home, he lost it all. And so you see the struggle and the trouble that he went through. So we're reading this, and I'm just like, oh gosh, I don't want anything like this to happen. But at the same time, that I feel like reading Job together with Richard was God preparing us for a season that we were not even expecting. And so flash forward, I launched the podcast in November of 2022. So I'm about to have my baby. And the thought was, I'll interview all these people and then we'll release it once I have the baby. And so Christmas time rolls around, and my doctor said, hey, let's schedule a C-section, or not a C-section, but let's schedule an induction if you would like for the baby. And, so you can have the baby by Christmas, and she was going to be on vacation. And so it was just all going to work out perfectly. And then I tell her, we schedule it, and then I just didn't have a peace about it. And over the entire weekend, and I was just like, there's not a medical need. And just for me to do this so that I can conveniently have a baby and have my doctor deliver the baby, I didn't feel right about it. Mm-hmm. And this is not to say that if anyone else is doing that, that's your decision. It's what you have a peace about. But I felt like I was playing God. And I told my husband, I was like, I'm going to cancel it because I feel like I'm playing God. There's not a medical need to do this. And so I canceled it, and I went and saw my doctor, and she's like, are you sure? I can still keep it in there. And I said, no, get rid of that. Leave it for somebody who actually needs the appointment. And so we flash forward to December 22nd, and it was right before my doctor went on her vacation. And so she's just like, okay, I can induce this baby today if you want. You tell me the words. And I said, is there a medical need? And she said, no. And I said, okay, then we are going to just wait until the baby comes. And so Christmas Eve, baby's moving like crazy. Christmas Day happens. So we're like, don't come yet. Don't come yet. And then we flash forward to the 26th, which was my actual due date. And then all the way to the 29th. So I'm 40 weeks and a couple days. And I woke up that morning with a horrible pit in my stomach, like something's wrong. And I had an appointment that day with another doctor. And so I was just like, I'm just going to wait to go. But I didn't even tell my husband that I had this horrible feeling. I just kind of dealt with it. And I was like, whatever happens, it's okay. It's okay. And so he came home to watch our other kids. And I went into the doctor's office with the doctor I didn't even know. And he comes in, he's like, all right, let's hear the baby. And I said, okay, just so you know, don't tell me if this is a boy or girl. We're waiting to find out. And as soon as he pulls the monitor and does the sonogram, he just says, I'm sorry, but I don't hear a heartbeat. And I'm like, what? Like, what are you kidding me? Like, this is a joke, right? And so he just says, I'm sorry, I don't hear a heartbeat. And so he goes and he's, let me get another doctor and confirm. And so he calls in the other doctor and the other doctor confirms. And then I just start losing it. And so that began my rough.
Yeah.
That began what was the worst day of my entire life, or the next day was the worst day of my entire life, to what would be the worst year of my entire life. And I called my husband and he's screaming. We live like right by the hospital or the doctor's office we were at. And the sweet nurse who attended our church at the time was just like, I can take you home. And I was like, no, I live right there. I'll be fine. She's like, you're not fine. And I said, no, I'm not fine, but I'll be fine driving home. And so they told me the next steps. I could either stay home that night and come in early the next morning to deliver the baby, or I could go in that night. And so I said, no, I'm coming back tonight. I just need to get someone to watch my children. And so went home, cried with my husband. My dad came to get our big kids. And then we went to the hospital, and it's like the worst feeling, because whenever you go to a hospital to have a baby, it's like exciting.
Right.
This life is coming out. And so they put you back in this room away from everybody else. And part of me just thinks like it's so they don't hear your screams and you don't hear the baby's screams. And it's just horrible. And everybody at the hospital was so sweet and kind. And we're just praying the whole time, God, please do a miracle. Pray that they're wrong. And the sweet nurses that were there were just like, I mean, we could do another sonogram if you want. And it's like, no. And so I think we started at like 6:00 that night. And then I won't go through all the details of everything, but then the next morning, December 30th, I delivered him and it was just silent. And they placed him on my chest and it just was like no movement, nothing. And all you can hear is my husband and I just screaming. And so we held on to him for several hours, and then eventually they took him away, and we got home and we decided to bury him. And so we went to the grave site. And so we were just thinking like, man, we should be holding our baby, but we're at a grave site. And then we planned a little memorial service for just our family for that following week. And you just see them burying your child. And it was horrible. It was just horrible. And so like I said, that began my rough when I was when the doctor told me that news. And I can't look at that doctor. We had a blessing of a child after we lost our son. So he was a boy. Everett is his name. And flash forward, I got pregnant after 9 months. And that's a whole other thing too. But anyway, I just couldn't see that doctor. And so how did I get through that really hard season? Was relying on God. I know that in situations like that, it's so easy for people to like, God, why would you do that? I mean, and don't get me wrong, I did question, like, why did we have to experience this? I don't know. But I think back to the Job thing, like I went back and I was like, Job went through all that junk that he went through. And then because I know scripture, and I don't know all of it super well, but I do know stories. I'm like, one of the stories that I always like to share with people too is that if people are familiar with David and Bathsheba, King David, there's Bathsheba, and she was this beautiful woman who was not his wife. She was married to somebody else, and she's bathing. So I'm like, imagine, ladies, you're bathing somewhere publicly, or privately out in the public, and this man is watching you. That's disturbing. And then he takes you in and he rapes you. And then he gets your husband tries to get your husband with you so that it looks like she finds out she's pregnant. And then he tries to get the husband to sleep with her, but he's on the front line of the war. And so he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And so then he gets him killed. So it's like, you're violated by someone watching you. Then you're violated physically by being raped. And then you get pregnant, and then you lose your husband, like all these things. And then yet David was a man after God's heart, after repentance and all that kind of stuff. And so it's just like, so I would think about like, those are just a couple of stories, Job and then Bathsheba. And I would think like, there are so many more stories, and then so many other really hard things that people go through. And so for me to sit there, and I would say, I would struggle and question things, and I'd be like, I know God is good. because he's good. Because I would think the opposite of God being good is God is evil. So if I truly believe that if God is evil, then that means Satan is good. So then I would just like wrestle some more with that. Okay, so if Satan is good, well, first off, God created me. He knows everything about me. He knows everything about you. He created this entire universe. And so if Satan is good, we'll role play this. If Satan is good, well, what I do know about him is he wants to steal, kill, and destroy me. He wants nothing good for me. He wants to see my destruction. And so he didn't create me. God did. He doesn't love me. God loves me. And so then I would toil with that. I'm like, okay, so if I believe that God is not good, that he caused this horrible thing to happen, that he allowed it to happen, why we don't know. And I always say, like, I have no idea why everybody goes through different pains that they go through, why we went through that. But if it means that somebody hears my story and it brings them to the Lord, then it's worth it. So if somebody is listening and they hear this and maybe they're far from God, they don't know him, they do know him, but they're mad at him for the life that he's given them or the life that's just happened to them. If it's for that person listening, then my suffering is worth it. Is completely worth it. And I would think too, and I hope I'm not too jumpy, but I would think my son did not have to suffer. I 100% believe he is in heaven. So the person suffering, the people suffering were me, my husband, and our family. So he never had to go through any of the pain that we had to go through. And maybe he would have had, like, it kind of to go back to, I had this gut feeling of not inducing him. And I think that there still would have been the end result. And so I believe that that was God protecting us from ultimately the end result, because maybe if I had induced it, I would have blamed myself. Like, I shouldn't have induced him, you know? I mean, I guess I could have still blamed myself of, I could have induced him and it wouldn't happen, but the Lord knows our days are numbered. And I think that helped me as well. But to go back to like the wrestling with, is God good? If he's not, then is God evil? Well, no, he can't be evil. He's good. Is Satan good? No, Satan is evil. And so I would just kind of think of those things of, I know God is for me and there's an ultimate purpose. And just the same with Job. God used Job's story to speak to thousands of people. And so there's a spiritual world going on around us that is bigger than ourselves. And so that really helped me. Did I have amazing days? No, I sat in the same chair for weeks at a time. I couldn't talk to people. The people that I trusted that were part of our community, we ended up losing, and that was really hard. And I had some friends, I had so many people, we had so many people who loved us, but I couldn't talk to people. I mean, for the longest time, my mom or my dad, my parents would come and they would take care of the kids, and I would just sit there in the same spot, cry, even though I knew the truth about the Lord. And so, and I knew people I assumed, this is just me assumption. I assumed people thought you should be fine now. What's the big deal? Like, get on with life, blah, 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 blah. And I didn't. I mean, up until a year, not even, even after that. So I mentioned that we ended up having our fourth daughter and we had her last May, but I found out my husband and I both were just like, we're going to be open to I didn't really want to try having another child because I just mentally couldn't. And I just said, whatever, we'll leave it up to put it in the Lord's hands. Like, we're not going to prevent, but we're not going to try, type of thing. And so at 9 months, exactly postpartum, I found out that I was pregnant with our daughter. And that was a whole other mess of, I am mourning my son. Now I'm celebrating new life. I don't know how to do this. I can't see another baby still. I can't go to baby showers. This was at the time. If I see someone holding a child, a little baby child, I lose it. And I don't know how to talk about it. People don't understand. And, the only people who understand are the people who went through it. You don't want anyone to go through it. So it's like, I'd rather not have someone to talk to about this because I don't want them to have to experience it. But unfortunately, those of us, and so I was terrified, high anxiety of, is this child going to live? My doctor. So I did end up seeing my same doctor because she wasn't the one who delivered my son. So it was just kind of weird. I guess another little kind of blessing in a way because I love her and trust her. And so I would see her, but she would see me like every week, every other week, up until I had our daughter. And even when I had that delivery, it was all just like flashbacks of like, that thing is guaranteed just because everything seems perfect, because everything seemed perfect and was perfect with our son, and we lost him. And so it was more of just, I don't know what's going to happen. And it wasn't even until like a few months after we even had her that I felt like I was actually myself again. And there are moments where it's still just like super hard. And then other moments where you're like, I feel guilty that I'm holding my other child. But my husband and I talk about him often, especially with our children. We have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, and then now a 10-month-old. And he's in conversations when the hard part is when people say, how many kids do you have? Like, I don't know how to answer that, because if I say I do have 3 living children here, but I have 4 children, and I get it just varies on what I do and how I answer. But I'm always so awkward with it. But anyway, so I hope that kind of helps answer the question of like, life sucked, life was hard. We lost our child, and I had to rely on God. I did not know how. I don't know how you cannot, because I have to have a hope and knowing that there's a purpose in what's going on, and that my ultimate life is not here where we are currently. Ultimately, it's in heaven with my Savior. And I know and I believe that I'm going to see my son one day.
I believe it too. And I'm sorry you went through that. There's no way I can imagine it. I remember asking you, are you upset at God at all? And you weren't. Are you able to kind of like walk us through that, like how you were able to be shielded from turning from him? Because I know sometimes traumatic things will happen and people will be like, well, this is my opportunity to just rebel. Because obviously, like, God didn't have me or whatever. But you didn't do that. Like, what? Are you able to explain like how that was possible? Like, was there a process to it?
I mean, honestly, I think it was because I knew scripture and I had read these stories of people. I mean, even and for people, if they're listening, they're like, well, I don't know scripture. How am I going to, it's just, I don't know all of it. I know some stories, right? But like, even knowing that the people who walked with Jesus were martyred for their faith. So they were killed, some beheaded. And it's like, okay, if the people that were with Jesus, they saw him, they were his people. If they suffered, then it's inevitable that we're all going to suffer. So it's just, when is that going to happen? And I, back to, I guess, the podcast and preparation for this, when back in November, or I guess in the fall, when I was pregnant with our son, I interviewed a friend of mine from college, and she became a widow at 37, and they had 4 children. And we lived in separate towns, but I would see the things that she would post about and write about. And she would always, like, she was struggling, but she would always give God glory, because she knew her husband was healed in heaven. So it was just kind of the same thing. She was suffering, he wasn't. And so there was a purpose in her remaining. And so she wanted to make sure that his name was known. So I saw that. And I just thought, like, when I go through a hard season in life, because it's going to happen for all of us, it just is going to look different at different seasons. When I go through a hard season, I hope and I pray that I respond the way that my friend Kim responded. Because I have seen also, like you said, it's so easy to turn away from God and just be like, okay, forget you, God. You made this happen, or you allowed this to happen. Sometimes too, it's because we need to rely on him. I mean, I don't know. We don't know of all these things. And there were definitely tons of times too where I was like, what did I do wrong? Did I sin? Did I do something in my past that caused me to receive this punishment? And I just like had to push that aside. I don't know. I mean, I don't even know if that's like theologically accurate to think that way, because is that like a karma-based thing that I would struggle with that? And just think, either way, I can't control what happened. It happened. And so I can either use that to hurl insults at God, or I could use that and praise his name in hopes that God can use my story to bring someone closer to him. And ultimately, that's my most important thing that I care about. So if I have to suffer, then I suffer. And I did. Yeah. And it's going to be with me forever. And so God used my story for your glory and not for my anger towards whatever. And I also know, there's like, I needed to grieve. And when people go through hard things, you got to grieve. It's not just like everything's great, because it wasn't great, but it was, what do I need to cling on to during this season? I don't want to cling on to alcohol. I don't want to cling on to whatever it may be,
Numb the pain.
Yeah, just scrolling my life away. But sure, there were moments of scrolling. There were moments of whatever, but it's just like, this is ultimately what I prioritize and is important to me.
Yeah. And
I have children too, living children, that I'm like,
yeah,
they need to see that we're still praising God, even though we're in pain. And of course, they didn't fully comprehend either. But
So then, I know sometimes too, I know you and Richard are strong and a strong team. How did you and Richard support each other? Like how, because I'm sure grieving is different for everybody, right? Like you may be going through a certain process that he's not going through yet, or he may be going through something you're not going through yet. Like, how did you lean on each other to get through that? Because I know sometimes the enemy will use tragedy too to like separate a strong marriage. Like, how did you and Richard support each other?
you know, there were a lot of times where it was just like, let's talk about it. We would just hold each other and cry. And then there may be some times where I would be like, can you cry like I'm crying?
Yeah.
But like we just like you said, we grieve differently. And so I think, I think it helped that we were studying scripture before. And I don't know at what point did we start reading scripture together again. I think kind of soon after, because we just were like, we need to
Right.
be doing this. And so just having that, and and what was interesting too is that we both did respond differently. I wanted to talk about it, or I wanted people to bring up Everett's name, and he would have preferred to bring his name up himself. And so that's, kind of a different thing. But I think it was a lot of just like holding each other, crying. We both would talk about it when needed. I would talk about it more. And then sometimes we just both would sit there and watch our big kids playing and just say like, Everett should be here. Or think about like, man, what I would give to have crying, screaming baby at night when it's not getting any sleep. Like what I would give for, the list would go on. So I think just that open dialogue with one another and just holding each other when we were both at our low.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel like that made you stronger together, even though it was so hard to be able to rely on each other?
Absolutely. I think that going, like both of us, we lost our child, and it was also different too, because I held, I had Everett with me for 9 months. And so he would just like feel him on my stomach moving and stuff like that. And so I think when he held him in real life, that, it's so obviously it's a bond because we're bonded together in our marriage, but like it's a weird bond. I don't know. I don't really know how to explain it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Then, so going through that, obviously very challenging. Sure, there's still days that are super challenging. Is there an area in life right now that you're working through that some of the same principles that you used through this last season might help you, or strategies might help you to overcome your current challenge?
Yeah, I think so. Like now it's life. Moments of remembering Everett pop up. But it's, the heaviness and the grief of it all is not like how it was, but there will be moments of it. So it's like, I guess what I'm going through now is definitely less intense, per se. But I think like, I feel like it's so silly to talk about, but then I know like it's more of a heart issue type thing. So I do want to share it because it's like what I'm dealing with right now. So like I we talked about my podcast and yours, and like we both have a similar heart behind both of ours, and mine, like I want women to realize who they are and what they're doing. But ultimately, it's not a faith-based podcast, but I interview women who are Christians and I interview women who aren't. And so I want those women who do follow the Lord, I want their stories to be spread out to other women so that they would have a desire to follow him, or at least sprinkle of an interest or just a knowledge of who God is that could propel to something. And so that's the ultimate heart behind it. But what I've been struggling with lately is making it about myself, or like thinking in my head, even though I know that's not what I want, or like, oh, I want it to grow. And then I think, well, why do I want it to grow? Am I wanting it to grow for vanity purposes, or am I wanting it to grow because I really care about the gospel? Or like, I definitely care about the mission, but I'm like, the underlying thing of it is that I want the gospel to be proclaimed, even in the episodes that don't even talk about him, that it would draw people in. And so like, I've just been going back and forth and just thinking like, are you, and then I've been getting burnt out, even though I love it. And so I'm just thinking like, Is the issue here like, am I making it about too much about myself and forgetting the purpose behind it? Because that's a problem. And so then let's go a little deeper with that. Okay, so if I'm making it about myself, and then when I realize that I'm doing that, then I just either have to shut things off or like take a break or get a heart alignment check. But then I think, okay, so if you're making it about yourself, what is the ultimate issue there? Is it I want to be loved and valued and approved by other people? Okay. So am I putting my hope and my value in the opinions of other people? Yeah. Do I want that? No. Where should my ultimate value and identity be in, or who should it be in? Well, that's in the Lord. And I like these things that I know, but it's like, okay, this is all of this. Like the root issue is I want to be liked by other people. I want to find, I want my find that value. And then it's like, okay, so that's a problem and let's deal with that. And so I guess I feel like it's kind of different than what I was dealing with Everett, but in the same thing of knowing like now it's like I'm making it about self, and before it was like I don't know, like now it's my illusion of control type of thing. As it before is like lack of control. I don't know if I'm fully answering your
Yeah,
question.
that makes sense. That does make sense. And I understand that a lot because that's totally human and natural, I think, is for our minds to go there with things. Like how many people liked my post today? Well, that means I'm
Yeah.
loved. But it's not, I don't know, it matters to us. And I think it should matter some, but you're right. Like, is it the driving force behind what I'm doing today? And I know your heart is right. And I know that your driving force is to get the message out and help other women. And I think maybe even it could be like a temptation, right? Like a temptation to like think about self more or think like, I don't know, but I understand it completely because I go through it too with things. And I know that's so relatable to everybody because I think everybody goes through it. You said a strategy is so if you feel like you're going down that path, to just stop, like pause maybe for a minute
Yeah,
and
either
kind of analyze. Yeah.
either like I'll pause or I won't look at like downloads or like silly things like that, or maybe I just won't, even though I want to honor the person that I've interviewed, like I just won't promote as much. I just won't be on the online sphere, and or if I do share something, then I'll just keep it away and know that like okay, I'm just not going to look at numbers right now because my validation, and it's not even about me. It's like my validation is not in how many people are listening or not listening or watching or whatever. It's like the whole thing at the beginning too. I remember saying, and I probably shared with you as well, that like if it impacts one person, then it's worth it. And so mission accomplished, So it's like God can use that person's story. Maybe it's just one person, maybe it's 100 people, maybe it's 1,000 people, but whatever it is, like God has somebody's ears listening. And what's been really cool about it too is that when I do get down or whatever, every time that's been happening lately in the past month or so, because it's just been like hit or miss, I'll get an email or I'll get a text from somebody that is just encouraging me about the women that they're listening to, and they're just saying, please keep doing this, it's really inspiring, or whatever, like they'll say something, so then I'm like, okay, keep going, but it's not about me, like it's just a thing.
And that's probably like a lifelong battle that we have as humans, I think, that we'll probably continually go through it. I don't know how to completely throw it away. Like, are we able to throw it away like John in the wilderness eating locusts? Crazy man. Like, are we able to like completely throw it away like that? I don't know. But I feel like it is a process, but it's good to recognize and then have strategies of when we feel it surfacing. Like, what am I going to do about it?
Yeah.
And then it's like comparison to like, what am I watching that's making me compare myself? Like I took, I think 7 days off of reality TV because I felt like I was addicted to it. Like I just loved watching dating shows and the drama, and it just made my life interesting. But I would feel bad after, and And then I would like be analyzing the people, like how young are they? Like I should do my hair like that. I should do my makeup like that, you know? So it's like a comparison thing and just a very unhealthy thing. And so I fasted for 7 days from it and realized there was no purpose in it at all. Like no purpose. But as I'm watching it and allowing myself to just absorb all this stuff, I'm trying to think of the words to say. It's going to make me compare myself to others more and it's not even reality, right? Like it's reality TV, but it's not fully reality. It's a lot of drama. So, I don't know the point I was making with that other
Just like,
than,
no, go
yeah,
ahead.
I don't know the point I was making with that, but it's like, well, oh yeah, what you're absorbing. So like if you're watching something, even if it's like a treat to watch it or you're binge watching something, like is that coming into you and then affecting other areas of your life, you know?
It's so important. How have oh, I'm just curious. Sorry. I'm curious to know, like, did you after the 7 day fast, did you like are you completely off it or did you implement it
So
back
I
in or
think so after this is funny. I don't know if it's funny. But after the 7 days, then I was like, okay, there's a Married at First Sight that I have to catch up on because I made it through the 7 days. So then I watched the Married at First Sight and I was like, I don't even miss this. Like, this is not helping me at all. Like, there's nothing about this that is going to help me. So then I prayed and I was like, God, can you help me do longer? And so then I did another 21 days after that. And then now I'm off those 21 days. So I've allowed myself to watch some shows, but I have canceled Netflix because that is my area that's easy for me to get off the handle. So I've canceled Netflix. And then you know what Netflix does? They're
they're
like,
like,
you still have a week left. Don't, please come back. So I'm going to be strong in that. Like, I do have till April 1st. I can watch some shows, but I'm trying to invite God in it. Like, as I'm watching this, like, is this just an unhealthy addiction for me? Like, is there something you can show me in this? Is it just about moderation? Like, should I be getting any enjoyment out of this? So, starting April 1st, I will have no access to Netflix. So I just declare that, but we'll see what happens with the rest of that journey. But it's just, I think it was wasting a lot of my time. Like it was giving me the wrong ideas and views about things. And it was also wasting my time that I could have been doing other things.
yeah. Good for you though. Good job, Angie.
Well, thank you. We'll see where it goes. So, ending this up, is there anything like any advice you want to give to another mom who is going through something really hard right now? What would you say to encourage her or to help her along in her day?
Well, I mean, I would think if you are going through something that's really hard and challenging right now, you got to go through those emotions. You got to cry it out. You got to feel what you need to feel. Sometimes those feelings may last a little longer and sometimes not as long. I also, we don't want to sit there forever, but also we need to grieve. So it's like we need to allow that space. And if we feel like we can't get out, then we, seek additional help or additional guidance. And I would encourage somebody if you're dealing with something, it may not be the exact same thing that I dealt with. It may be very similar, maybe completely different. And whatever your walk is with God, if you believe him, if you don't, whatever it is, I would highly recommend that you would just pray. If you don't believe him, just say, God, I'm mad at you. I don't know why that, like, do you even exist? Like, just let he knows what we're feeling anyway. So just talk to him about it, to pray and look into his word. I 100% believe that we can learn and understand. We may not understand everything, but that just gives us a lens to realize sometimes we can start thinking outside of ourselves of what we're going through, and that maybe there can be a purpose in whatever we're experiencing. We may never know what that is, but how can that be used to help somebody else and for a greater purpose? And that's what really has been helpful for me with when we lost our son. And then just another things too, of just like, okay, it's hard. There's something with this. I can grow from this, learn from this. But ultimately, too, I want to cling to the Lord and I want this to be used for his kingdom.
Well, thank you for sharing your heart and your story. I know it is going to encourage a lot of people. It encourages me just listening to it. just to keep the faith. And like you said, even if you're upset, don't stop talking to God. Like, still talk to Him. Like, tell Him exactly how you feel. I think that is huge because that's keeping that relationship going, even through all the hardship. And then, yeah, reaching out for help. If you need to reach out to somebody, don't be afraid to do that to get help. So thank you so much for being on here today. And we need to get together soon.
We
I know
do.
summer's coming up, maybe a play date.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, Angie, I appreciate you having me on, and I love that you're doing this too, just being honest with where you're at and where other people are at, because people need to realize that it's not always easy and not everybody has it together because we don't,
Right.
nobody does. And so it just brings a reality to like things are hard. Let's talk about it. What are we doing? We don't want to sit there. So I just thank you for having me and having your guests and having this show.
Well, thank you. Until next time.